Welcome to the A-List. I'm Anthony DeCurtis, and at the very top of our A-List, we're really happy to have for our debut show, Trey and Paige from Fish. Thanks a lot, guys, for coming out today. Well, listen, you have a new album out, Farmhouse, that was in fact recorded in a farmhouse. You want to talk about how you ended up there? What made you decide to do that?
We've been putting on these end of the summer shows. We did the Great Lent, the Lemon Wheel, and our New Year's shows that were events that we built from the ground up. We would, plan out the roads and the fences, and we had such a good experience with that. I think that spurred the idea of actually building a space to record. So we moved a 200-year-old barn up into the woods, and the space itself was an art project that lasted for about 3 years, and
wow.
We used salvage, and there's old doors from India and a lot of vibe pieces, and when it was done, we moved some gear in there and did the album. So I think we saw the whole album as a studio recreation of what we've been doing with the live shows.
Yeah, it was nice to get out of traditional recording studios that can be sterile, and you got to go away for months at a time to go do your album, and living at home and recording. It was very relaxing.
Well, it's interesting. That's one of the things I actually wanted to ask you about was, this whole relationship between, obviously you guys are one of the most, best known live bands probably in rock and roll history. And, then there's the whole other experience of recording in the studio where you've tried different techniques. And, could you talk a little bit about that? Just the difference between performing live and then, being in an enclosed space and trying to make a record.
We've always, we've played so many more concerts than we have recorded albums. We've only recorded a handful of albums, and it was always, it's just become more and more comfortable with time. Both have become more and more comfortable, and the energy playing off the crowd is you can really feel it, and you can taste it when you're playing live, and I think creating an environment that we played in for this last album, it was sort of, well, it just brought it all together. The energy was still there. We were still playing live. The four of us were playing. It was all in one big room. We had our techs there, and we had our recording engineers, and everybody was just in this one big barn area. Trey, why don't you feel them? I'm still.
One of the things I was going to say was, I think that in the past, for our first few albums, we had seen recording as a chance to recreate what we've been doing live on stage. Mm-hmm. And with this album, and with actually the last three, starting with Billy Breeze, there was more of a sense that we wanted to have the recording be an event in itself. And the greatest example, I think, would be Exile on Main Street. Mm-hmm. When you listen to this album, it's such a document of, it's almost like a journal entry of this period that they spent, in Keith Richards' basement. And you get a taste of what it was like to be there by listening to that album. And I think that this album to us, it became more about the event, the experience itself. So if that experience is being in a cold, windowless room, it wasn't working for us. Mm-hmm. So instead, we got this space that was rich with vibe, and our friends were around, and let the tape decks roll. And
sure. One of the things, I actually interviewed Jimmy Miller, who produced Exile on Main Street one time, and he was telling me, he goes, everybody talks about how incredible the sound is on that album, and he goes, and the whole time I was just being driven crazy by the fact that we were trying to make a record in this totally non-recording studio environment, and yet still the sound of it, just comes, through so powerfully, Obviously, you used Bryce Goggin on this record, talk about what your relationship with him was like, what was his vibe, trying to make a record in these, more casual kind of circumstances.
Well, he's a more casual kind of guy than some of the producers that we worked with in the past. Mm-hmm. And we've worked with Barry Beckett and Steve Lillywhite, for example,
sure.
Both of whom are legendary and extremely talented producers. With Bryce, he's an extremely talented producer who's closer in age to us, He's American. He grew up. He's friends with. We have mutual friends. So I think with him, it was it was more like a hang per se than he was one of the guys in a real down to earth way, and I think that's what we wanted.
Yeah, he walked into the barn the first day, and we had him and our engineer up to the studio, and I was like, "What do you think?" He's like, "This is heaven." He couldn't believe. And it really is beautiful too. It's not just the structure is beautiful, the view is beautiful. You got it was snowing most of the time up there. A lot of the time they actually got snowed in a couple of times, and we're stuck there for 2 or 3 days at a time. One day for 2 or 3 days, but he was so easy to get along with and very confident and. Really had his opinions and wasn't afraid to assert them, but really was most interested in just sort of enabling us and helping us pick good tracks and that sort of thing.
We solicited questions from some of your fans that I also want to just kind of ask a few of those. One of them, that was pretty cool, was, is there an alter ego band that comes out during rehearsals, like maybe a heavy metal band?
Yes.
The short answer would be yes, indeed.
Is there an alter ego band?
Is there, sort of an aspect of performing under those kind of, circumstances that maybe people don't see, even in your, much vaunted live performances?
Are they talking, you think, about our new 3-minute thrash version of Velvet Sea?
I think they're talking about
It could well be.
the new band, Armenian Man, is the name of the alter ego band. It's actually, practices are really fun when we practice, and we have great jams, and there's also a lot of kind of silliness that probably only we think is funny, and sometimes we have to be careful not to assume that other people will find humor in all the silly little things that go on at band practice, but
We've made that mistake before.
Yeah, the metal's only a part of it.
Well, one of the things, too, in terms of, live performance, Robert from Newfoundland, Canada asks, how do you decide what albums to cover for your Halloween concerts? I saw you guys do Remain in Light that time.
That was
really a lot of fun.
That was a good one. Thanks.
The first two were voted by the audience. The voting, because we have our audience is probably lazy with the letter writing. There was only about 30 votes, but I did vote nonetheless.
Still carried the day.
Yeah,
That's right.
The White Album and Claustrophenia.
You're not going to be covering the first Ramones album for your next.
No. But Remain in Light we chose ourselves. That was a really important album, I think, to all of us in high school. And for me, that was my favorite of all the ones we've done. It took a lot of work to translate that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the
rhythms were incredible. I mean, just that whole sort of bottom, man, was unbelievable.
It's a great album.
Mm-hmm.
David Byrne collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
So that one we chose ourselves, and Loaded we chose ourselves.
I think that both the first two albums, the ballot box was stuffed, so we just decided to start picking it ourselves. Because probably only one or two people that were actually
the ballot box for Claustrophenia.
Now in an alley with a bullet in the back of his head. It's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
What? Speaking of voting, I was struck that you'd mentioned, I think, that when you were working on maybe one of your previous albums, that you'd established a kind of elaborate sort of voting system within the band about decisions that you were making. I was intrigued by that. I was wondering if you could describe it. This system has just been abandoned. I understand.
The system sort of. I think starting with Billy Breeze, we were all trying to keep everybody involved. What's good about the live show, or can be good, is when everybody's really putting forth and seems to have equal kind of input in the jamming, and anybody can sort of lead the jam any particular way. We had that philosophy that maybe it could apply more towards the studio albums, and we sort of tried it with Billy Breeze, and then with Story of the Ghost, we had 30 songs we were considering for the album, and we had Andy Wallace was working with us, and the four of us and Andy would sit in a room and, check off the ones you liked, and
It was your own ballot box stuffing,
was-
however,
it
that
was-
scuttled that whole system, I understand.
It definitely, yeah. I don't know that it's always. One thing I really like about this album is that Trey, primarily, and with Bryce and with all of us, but really it was a lot of Trey's vision, and I think that's what's nice. That comes through to have a singular vision. Because there can be millions of decisions made over the course of making an album,
course,
and
yeah.
most of them are really just so minuscule that if you get bogged down with everybody trying to help in every little decision, you can miss the big picture or skew the big picture somehow. So I think that comes through, the sort of simplicity. That's part of the reason I think it flows well for me.
I think that issue of like sort of sorting out some of the kind of, I mean, for want of a better word, kind of power issues in a band, I mean, it's probably the main thing about trying to hold a band together over the years. I mean, how do you work out that balance between, everybody having a say and then in a certain situation, somebody really being given the power to just say, like, look, this is what we need to do here, and, having a kind of clear vision about what the next stage of things is.
I'm especially proud and excited of that aspect of the way things have gone with the band, because at Billy Breathes, a lot of discussions came up, and it seemed like each band member had sort of a concern, and over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, those concerns have been addressed pretty directly, starting with concerns that Paige had, and then concerns that Mike had about songwriting issues. And what was so exciting to me was that I had these songs written for Farmhouse before we did Story of the Ghost, and I had a vision in my mind that was pretty clear of what became the Farmhouse album. At the time, we were in a different place, and it was important to us to write songs as a group. So for a number of the songs on Story of the Ghost, we chose the songs that were written as a group, and this album kind of had to be put on hold. And I think there was enough good feeling after the follow-through of that album that Paige and Mike kind of came to me and said, okay, this would be a good time for you to follow through on your vision of this next album.
Wow.
And I didn't feel, I felt like, in the midst of them giving me the space to do this project that they saw that I needed to do, we have just a great feeling along the band. And I think moving forward now, all the discussion right now is about trying to find some of Mike's songs and really supporting those, and some songs that Paige and Fish wrote. But I think everybody sees that the career is long and that there's room for all different kinds of projects.
Exactly.
Nobody's really threatened, and that, I think, is fairly rare. We're written as a group, and this album kind of had to be put on hold. And I think there was enough good feeling after the follow-through of that album that Paige and Mike kind of came to me and said, okay, this would be a good time for you to follow through on your vision of this next album.
Wow.
And I didn't feel, I felt like, in the midst of them giving me the space to do this project that they saw that I needed to do, we have just a great feeling along the band. And I think moving forward now, all the discussion right now is about trying to find some of Mike's songs and really supporting those, and some songs that Paige and Fish wrote. But I think everybody sees that the career is long and that there's room for all different kinds of projects.
Exactly.
Nobody's really threatened, and that, I think, is fairly rare. That may be something that sets the band apart.
I was going to say, just in terms of that, I mean, it seems to me that a lot of bands go down for that very reason, that you're looking at this moment and it's like, this is my song, or this is what I want to do right now, and not having that sort of picture of things being a kind of process, It's like anything, a relationship or...
That's what's so exciting to me about the way things stand, that we experimented with total democracy, and we've experimented with singular vision, and with each experiment, failure or success, I feel like the fabric of the band seems to be getting stronger, and it really feels stronger now than it ever has. I'm not just saying that. I mean, I'm sure that all three of the other guys would agree with that after this Farmhouse record and the New Year's show, the feeling was as solid as it's ever been. Like we're on a very solid base right now, and that there's room for anything. If Fish wants to do, John Fishman wants to do an African drum album and comes to us and says, for this next album, I want to do an experimental drum album that, Paige plays drums and you play zither. I think we could do it. I think there's a feeling that that would be fine.
Way it's headed.
Back. I think it's true, and a lot of it does have to do with just the amount of time and the number of years that we've been together, and it does help. It does help to be able to see things in the big picture, and there is time for everything, and the more albums come and go, the bigger the more albums you have behind you, you can sort of see, oh, this is what that was, and they don't all have to be everything. Not every album has to be everything,
exactly. That's exactly right.
And if they try to be, they're going to miss something along the way, probably.
Well, one of the things also, in terms of this idea of processes, I think involves a certain amount of spontaneity at the same time as a certain amount of planning, which leads me to my question from Jane from New York, which was, I thought, again, a pretty interesting question, which is, how much of your jamming is conscious consideration of music theory versus instantaneous response to each other?
The good jamming is instantaneous response, and the bad jamming is consideration of music theory, as far as I'm concerned.
Right, and I think, hopefully, in the spontaneity, there is, we have a certain knowledge or a certain language that we all speak, a certain level of musical communication where we hear, oh, this is leading this way, this is leading that way. Hopefully, it's not conscious, but you can apply theory to it, or it is involved. But ideally, it's completely off the cuff, and you're not even aware really what the notes are coming out.
Music theory to me has always been something that comes after the fact, in my eyes. Music happens, right, and then you kind of look back and think, oh, why did that work? And there is a way to kind of look back and analyze that work. But I think if the theory is coming in your mind before the music, then you're going to have, mental music. Which is, hey, maybe there's room for.
That's right. It's title of your next album, obviously.
Mental music.
It's interesting too. Because that kind of training or understanding, it's almost like you forget it, but it's something that sort of also helps make your spontaneous gestures meaningful. If you know that stuff and you know where you're going. It's not like you're thinking, well, now it wouldn't be fascinating if I turn this into that, but more like your understanding of it is just part of your almost physical playing.
Right. It's someone with a great vocabulary is going to be able to communicate their ideas better than someone with a lesser vocabulary. But, if you're speaking English, but if you're sitting there with a thesaurus searching for, complicated words to make your...
Right.
It's, it should be about conveying an emotion, right?
And that's what you're talking about is the ideal also, that, ideally you just have it, forget it, and it's really just sort of a constant, you're always battling yourself, or not battling, but it's always putting yourself in that place. How can I best get to, how can we get to that spot where we're not thinking, and it's not as if it's all the time, we're always constantly off the cuff, but when it's really good, it's hopefully, spontaneous.
There's a lot of discussion about getting your brain out of the way. That comes up a lot.
How do you do that?
Massive drug use.
It's worked for many of us.
That or just a piece of wood.
We had a question from Jake who wants to know. This maybe ties in with covering the albums in concert as well. But how do you guys choose what covers you play in concert? Who usually comes up with them, and how do you sort of evaluate it?
Well, if they clap at the end, we'll do it again. But that's the evaluation.
Last couple of tours we started doing this thing. The cover thing became very funny the last couple of tours because we were doing this thing where, whatever song was on at the party the night before on the radio in that morning, we would learn these songs backstage. So we were essentially doing a new cover every night. We would do, Van Halen one night, and then the Police the next night, and then I can't remember what else we did on the tour. Tub Thumping, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And most of these songs we would do once.
Yeah, and we were spending a lot of time. We would spend the afternoon and then in between sets and learning whatever song it was we were going to play for that encore. And I think that was a lot of fun, but more recently, I think we've sort of I've thought anyway, let's, we've got so many good originals. Sometimes we only get to play them once a tour. And if I was going to see this band, maybe I would want to go see their originals.
Rather than your cover of Tub Thumping, for example, right?
No, not necessarily. The cover of Tub Thumping was really special, and some of them, and some of them are better than others. And that's, some of them end up getting played a couple of times. Some of them end up in the general rotation, and then the majority were just one-offs. It seems like we'd play them once, but everybody brings it. Everybody brings covers to the
It's
table.
really guys on the crew or anybody. I mean, a lot of times it would be we're just hanging out backstage and somebody say, "Oh, you should play this song." Okay, and you get the lyrics off the internet.
Yeah.
Right away. Print up the lyrics. Somebody runs to the store and gets the CD and
Purple Rain.
Purple Rain, or
New York, New York.
Oh,
we did New York, New York. Yeah, we did.
Hey, if you can make it there. But speaking of the internet, Tiffany from Louisville asks, first off, a comment from her. Fish is one of the greatest bands I've had the pleasure of listening to live and on CD. How do you feel about bootlegging and tape trading? And let me toss into the pot like MP3s. I mean, obviously we've had a lot of furor about all that lately. Where are you guys with all that?
Well, we've always let people tape our live shows and encouraged trading. And we've also encouraged people to trade them for free if you tape it for free, to not try and make money off of it. And there's no doubt that it's been one of our, if not maybe our biggest introduction to people has been through bootleg, listening to Fish tapes, and that's how so many people learned of us. I don't know if it still is, but a few years ago, that seemed like how everybody would hear, "Oh, I heard a tape, this show or that show." So that side of it, we're completely comfortable with. And I haven't necessarily made up my mind. I really, I'm reading about Napster and all these things going on and bands taking sides. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out in the end.
I have a very strong opinion about Napster.
Yeah, please.
Personally. I think
I'm an investor, so no, I'm only
fine. I think that people. I think that there's probably people that don't see the big picture, and some opinions of some people in the music industry are that with something like Napster, people are getting. What's going to happen is advertisers are going to start getting paid, and the artists aren't. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of managers and people in the industry who see the direction of. The way that an artist will get paid is to be attached to an advertiser eventually, because if you're not getting paid directly for the download of your music, then that's where the money will come from.
Whoever's little icon is in the corner of that screen is going to be the one paying.
I'm strongly against, music being attached to the selling of a product. That being said, I think that there's something great about, I think the internet is going to open up a lot of possibilities with music. And the shake-up of power is exciting to me in a certain way, and I'm happy that things are changing. But I think that people should just be aware of the whole picture. That when you're downloading this music, you're basically putting money into the hands of corporations for advertising and taking the money out of the hands of the performers.
Which is not something people necessarily realize or want to do.
Absolutely. I don't think the issues of it are fully understood.
Right.
I mean, I hadn't really heard that point of view as kind of clearly expressed. But I think that's absolutely right. I mean, with the whole advertising angle.
I also have. I'm just going to say this too.
Please.
We've been very lucky with our crowd, and the fans that come to concerts are sort of a self-policing. Singular voice. Mm-hmm. It's really turned into a very cool scene around, at least the people that we see around our concerts. So I have this faith that just because the crowd is in front of the department store doesn't mean they're going to smash the windows and loot.
Right.
That I'm not threatened by any of those things because I have a feeling that the fans will figure out a way to deal with it in a moral way. That might be naive, but it's happened before. When we did our New Year's show, this is an example I've used before, but we had 75,000 people, and when they left, the concert grounds were completely cleaned. We had a cleaning crew waiting to go, and there was 90 tons of recycling, and the grounds were clean. No one asked anyone to do that; they just did it, which I was amazed by. But I think that kind of sense of community,
and
could
personal responsibility
show up. Could happen in this situation, which would really be an amazing thing. But we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, it's so far from being played out. It is really it's
pretty
stuff
early.
is happening
We're in the
so
middle of all
quickly.
that. Yeah, absolutely.
Every week there's a new angle and a new. I didn't even know about Napster until a couple of weeks ago. I mean,
and now it's all over
and
the
now
place.
it's every single day there's an article in the paper about this side or that side of it, and that's just one thing, and there's going to be 5 other things that are going to affect it, and over the next year, and the record companies are scratching their heads, and the artists are scratching their heads, and
Well, one thing I was interested in asking you guys about, I mean, raised by your mentioning about the association of music with products, is obviously now it's become so common for, songs to be licensed for commercials, and obviously as more kind of, people with actual taste are doing it. You have something like a Nick Drake song turning up in a Volkswagen ad, and probably, more people having heard of Nick Drake in the last 6 months than maybe certainly throughout his whole life, and maybe even since he died in the mid 70s or whenever it was. How do you feel about that? What's the sense? I mean, it often strikes me that this used to be a real debate. Should you license your song for an ad? And now when you raise the issue with most people, they go, why wouldn't you? Of course you should.
Terrible. I think music is about real human emotions and celebration and ritual, and the concept of using it to sell a product. I mean, using a song that someone has an emotional connection to sell a product is diminishing that experience. So
it's a shame. I mean, if people feel like, I mean, I know, maybe Bob Seger was, having, when he sold, when you're not going to hear Like a Rock on the radio and not imagine a Chevy truck, crashing over some hill. Not that I had a particular emotional attachment to it, but, maybe some people feel that they have to do it or don't appreciate it. But it is nice. It's nice that we don't do that.
Like when people say, audience loyalty has diminished or whatever. I think that, that actually in some indirect way has to do with things like songs turning up in advertising. And, we're sort of like, well, if this song is really about a bottle of ketchup, why do I really have to invest myself in it? And who cares if they make another record?
More than that, when you take, let's say the 60s, when there was a war going on and there was music was, I think Jimi Hendrix, for example, it meant something in a deeper kind of way. And I think that the war that's going on for kids today is this sense that you grow up in a world where the getting more stuff and acquiring more products is like your lot in life. You grow up in sort of a mall culture where the only thing you have to look forward to is being a consumer. You kind of look at your life like, well, what is my life going to be about? As a teenager, this is my experience at least, where you look around, you think, well, I'm going to get a job and buy a bunch of stuff. So, and then you're looking for some kind of meaning in life. And then to think that music, which to me was the one thing that I found as a teenager that did have meaning, suddenly attaching that to that whole consumerism attitude is just, I haven't found that many things in my life that actually do have meaning other than, childbirth, which seemed pretty fraught with deep meaning to me, and music, and love, I suppose, but other than that, the world we're taking rituals one by one, and the mysteries of religion and even stargazing or fire looking. It's all kind of turning into this big world of consumerism where, that's what you have to look forward to in life, is getting more stuff. So that's why I just think attaching music, one of the last mysterious, music is so mysterious. Why does it make us feel the way it does? You feel so deeply moved, and then to sell something with it, it's just, it's terrible. I think it's rotten.
Absolutely.
We've had our offers.
Oh, I'm sure you have. Yeah, I remember talking about this one time with REM, and they were saying, because it's one thing to think about this. They were offered Microsoft at one point, and I remember Michael Stipe, saying to me, he goes, "Look, I use Microsoft. It's not about the product. I like the product," he goes, "but we just don't want our song to be." They wanted to use "It's the End of the World as We Know It" for Windows 95, and they got offered the Rolling Stones happily stepped into that gap, however, with "Start Me Up." So,
and I think that worked for the whole computer thing.
I wanted PJ, another of your fans, asked you were describing the sort of scene around your shows and obviously around the band. He sent in a question about changes in the lot scene. He said, in '94, it was peace, love, and happiness. Now it's young punks who don't even appreciate Fish, doing as many different drugs as possible.
Okay.
Way back in '94.
Well, there were people
it's
back in the early 90s.
Yeah, exactly. back in the 20th century, nobody did these drugs.
I think with each, there's sort of a constant cycling of people that find the band, get into the band, have a few years where they're sort of really into it, and then it kind of moves on for them. And I'm not saying that what he's saying is not true, but it is a sentiment that we've heard for years, even before that. Well, it's not as good as it was back in '89. Or how come it's like this now? It's
That's what they were saying in '94.
And they were saying that. That's what they said in '94. And we don't do too much to control the scene or try to. It's kind of, we like that it's kind of takes care of itself in a lot of ways, and I don't know. I've heard it from other people that the scene's changing, but I've been hearing it for so long. It's hard to say. I don't spend a lot of time out there either, so I don't have the personal feeling of, oh, this is really different. But when I do go out there, people generally seem pretty nice.
Plus, our scene, among the four of us, just if you asked us, it seems to just be getting better and better. So, backstage, things are pretty damn good.
Obviously.
Good. They ought to come backstage.
Probably going to wish you never said that. Yeah.
Come on back, PJ.
Following this up is Nathan from Yankton, South Dakota, asks, what did you feel after people said you took the spot of the Grateful Dead after Jerry died?
I think immediately I thought, that's not true.
Because?
I was proud of how far we had come, even while the Dead were playing, and it seemed like such an obvious and easy thing to say, and there's probably truth that there are people that came and started seeing us as a result of a void in their lives, but the people that stick around and really like it are the fans who are fans anyway, and it's a different flavor.
I know what I thought. I thought it was anybody who thinks that Jerry Garcia can be replaced in any way has no conception of what a monumental, important musician he was and what a monumental, important band they were in the context of American music history. That was the weirdest thing to me, and to me, it was just I mean, the Dead were, in my eyes, possibly the most important American band ever. And, one of the, 3 or 4 legendary.
Won't get an argument from me.
And so it's just, any more than Neil Young was the next Bob Dylan or what everybody was saying, or anybody's going to be the next anybody, but especially when you're talking about, like a Jimi Hendrix or a Jerry Garcia. I don't know if it's just that people, there's such a void left by a band of that stature suddenly, being off the scene after having been on the scene for so long and being leaders in such a way and so long that people are just looking for somebody to take their place. But it was just ridiculous, because if somebody really was a Deadhead, anybody who actually saw the Dead and was moved by them the way Deadheads were, you're not going to go to see some other band and get the same thing. So
People who were saying that were probably
people who were saying that weren't
the
Deadheads.
people who were
Well, I think you know what though. I think that it speaks for like the lack of opportunities for those kind of connections among people. Like that that the idea that was a genuine void that maybe couldn't be filled, or was maybe partly going to be filled in one way and not filled in another way, was almost too painful for people to. So I think the solution is just to get somebody and cram them in that void, and just plug it up.
It's a tough situation to be in too, because when people start saying that, to me, I was such a big fan and am such a big fan, and even like just as a guitar player, Garcia was such a huge influence on me, and I see him as, even just as a person, I do, and I always have looked in the way that he used to talk about looking to, the beat poets and writers, as he had people that I see them as a form of guidance in some ways, things to do right, things to do wrong, ways to respect your crowd. I learned from that. I was lucky enough to do a show with B.B. King not too long ago, and I felt the same way. I'm like, wow, this is B.B. King. I'm going to take as much as I can from this experience about how, not only how to play, but how to be a great musician and a great person, from talking to him. And I feel that way. So when people start comparing you to someone like that, you're in a little bit of a dilemma, because on the one hand, you want to say, yeah, I really do love these guys. They really do mean a lot to me, but sorry, I'm not the next anybody, you know what I mean?
Exactly. I happen to be a freestanding human being.
But I don't want to, start falsely distancing myself from the influence that they had on us as a band, because they did. So, all I can say is, look, loved them, still do. Loved being able to play with Phil. But if you're looking for more Grateful Dead in your life, you're not going to, sorry, it's over, you know what I mean? You missed it. Unless you want to listen to tapes or something.
Absolutely.
But
I think that I don't know, the sort of weight of that is just impossible to think about. Finally, I think it's an invitation. If the people who want that want to appear for it, great. If not, they can, look somewhere else to find whatever it is they need, but it's not a function anybody can really be expected to play.
Well, in a funny way, I would think that you would have a very good perspective on an issue like that, because you've been in, the position that you're in for a number of years, and you've kind of seen things probably that even, we've only been around, I don't know how long you've been doing music journalism, but a good long time.
Yeah, I've been, certainly actively for 20 years, but, I've been a fan. I mean, I went to see the Grateful Dead in, 1967, and so
exactly.
that and having a sense of, what all that meant, and that first round of deaths that came, when Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison all died, really within a year, as I remember it, it was frightening. And, what is this going to mean for the music? But, people rise up and, obviously every few years somebody's the new this or the new
Like
that.
Stevie
But
Ray
then,
Vaughan,
exactly.
comes out, oh, here's the new Hendrix, right?
But, Stevie Ray Vaughan was himself. And, on the other hand, you could feel that flame, sort of coursing through him, at the same times. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming out, man. It was really, really great. And I want to thank you all for watching the A-List. Check us out on June 7th. We'll have Carly Simon. And once again, we have Trey and Paige from Fish, and got a record out and a tour coming up. And, we're looking forward to all of it.
Thank you. Thank you.